Hello and welcome to my channel. Here I review movies, and today I want to talk about an older film called Dogma. It's a fantasy comedy from 1999 about Bethany, an abortion clinic worker, trying to stop Bartleby and Loki, two fallen angels, from re-entering heaven through a loophole. Kevin Smith wrote and directed the film, which stars Linda Fiorentino as Bethany, Ben Affleck as Bartleby, and Matt Damon as Loki. Okay, to begin, I want to be upfront in saying that I saw this movie as a kid and loved it for its crass humor. I have grown up watching Kevin Smith's films, and they have only grown on me as I've gotten older. So I might be a little biased about the quality of the writing, but I do think that Dogma is a well-written film. It's a basic hero's journey with a bunch of quirky companions helping Bethany along the way. We also get to see a bit of the villains and their motivations, and what ensues is a lot of humorous scenes of characters bantering back and forth and monologuing, very similar to what Tarantino does with his films. The story lays out its premise early on and follows its rules from start to finish. It's a parody of all things Christian with a lot of 90s references thrown in, but it still manages to teach true Christian values through the journey. It also manages to throw endless humor at the audience through fascinating stereotypes like the Black Apostle or the Sexy Muse. When these stereotypes run face first into each other, we end up with fun little flavor moments like Jay and Silent Bob trying to teach the Angel of Death how to smoke a joint. The humor comes often in a bunch of different forms, and there are no sacred cows. Everyone gets a bit of the humble pie in this one. The story also moves at a good pace and is constantly introducing new ideas, characters, and lore in order to keep things interesting. They manage to tie all the threads together neatly and introduce a number of great running gags. One of my favorite running jokes was how everyone they meet sees God differently. The voice of God sees him as a lonely, funny man, the Muse sees a sexy, empowered woman, and Bethany sees Alanis Morissette, a whimsical woman slightly older than herself who is kind and caring. It was a nice little touch on the idea of God appearing to everyone differently. The general cast does a decent job of their roles. Most of the extras are asked to just sit and react to the lead's monologues, and we get some good fear and anger responses from them and a few jilted lines. The supporting roles tended to be stereotypical characters that deliver humorous dialogue. These actors do a good job for the most part, and there aren't any awkward performances. Chris Rock, Salma Hayek, George Carlin, and Jason Lee were amongst the cast and had me in stitches. For standouts, you have Alan Rickman as Metatron and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon as Bartleby and Loki. Alan Rickman doesn't get a lot of screen time, but when he's there, he steals the scene every time. He plays the voice of God and a mentor to Bethany. He's funny, empathetic, and wise. Rickman injects all kinds of compassion into the story that draws you in despite his prickly exterior. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are tasked with playing buddies going on a road trip. As supernatural beings, they interact with the world in hilariously extreme ways, and cause all kinds of mayhem while sowing doubt amongst the people. Damon plays a dumb angel with a singular mind. He takes pleasure in killing others and messing with the minds of believers. Damon plays him as psychotic for the first part of the film, and it works wonderfully. In the climax, he's asked to show something much more human and manages to do the transition beautifully. Opposite him is Affleck as Bartleby, an angel who doesn't like violence initially, but who comes to embrace it once he realizes the truth about his mission. Affleck's character starts off charming and respectable, with tiny hints of sadism at his core. When the training wheels come off, he lets loose and shows his inner psychopath to the world. Affleck plays the finale like a crazed, desperate man. Both of them do well with the humor and the monologues they're given and nail their emotional journeys. Visually, the film looks a bit dated, but gets its story across clearly. They do a good job of making the conversations look interesting and include a lot of great visual humor for the audience to enjoy. There are a few special effects here and there, and the practical ones hold up alright while the digital ones look terrible. The textures are all wrong, but thankfully they only use it once or twice and for short periods of time. For the soundtrack, they used basic instrumentals that were meant to invoke the nostalgic sound of other films. The tracks tend to do a good job of getting the vibe right in the moment, but also tend to be just a bit loud and overly simplistic. Which brings me to the negatives. The visuals are dated and the film didn't have any standout moments even when it was released. The soundtrack is also quite forgettable and leaves the film without much of an identity. For the visuals, the only big moments are the practical effects scenes where the angels show off their wings and abilities, and the action scenes. The angels' practical effects were usually well done and still hold up today, but they aren't depicting anything that outrageous. A man walking on water or changing an item with the snap of his hand. They use clever editing tricks and it works, but doesn't stand out when compared with today's visual effects. The action scenes tended to be quite campy looking as well. They had slow motion punches and shots of the people being thrown around, but no impact shots and no injuries anywhere. They even used gag sound effects. Personally, I enjoyed this film a lot as a kid, and even more now as an adult. It's filled to the brim with clever comedy and good characters. I enjoy the themes of the movie a lot, and they did a decent job with the production. It's not the most original film, but it is very entertaining. As for a rating, I'd give this film a 7 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye.